Selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Natwar Singh. Part 34. The next day, I was received by Sir Lyndon. He was short, dark, and smile never deserted him. From what he said, I concluded that he was quite clearly being helped by the British for the arrangements. In my 2 days in Nassau, I noticed that pleasure, not politics, was a national passion. Nassau was for fun and frolic. These were taken seriously, not Commonwealth summits. We left for Nassau in October 1985. Rajiv Gandhi made a brief halt in London to meet Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher at 10 Downing Street. The main topic discussed was the South African apartheid regime. The British PM was rigid and self righteous on the matter of apartheid. British policy was to have the cake and eat it too. While they mildly criticized the apartheid regime in public, they maintained the closest trade relations with them. India's policy on South Africa was clear cut. Apartheid was an abomination, and we had severed all contacts with Cape Town in 1954. Rajiv strongly argued with the British PM on this issue, and it was finally decided that a group of 7 senior former Commonwealth leaders would visit South Africa and give a report at the next UN summit. Nassau was a tourist's paradise. The climate, the sun, the sand, and the sea combined to make their holidays memorable. On the opening day at the Nassau conference, Rajiv was the second speaker after Margaret Thatcher. It was not an easy act to follow because she was an accomplished speaker. I was sitting behind Rajiv. When he put aside the written text, I was apprehensive. He spoke so well that several heads walked up to him to congratulate him. This was rarely done. In 1985, Rajiv Gandhi was both Prime Minister of India and President of the Congress Party. In December of that year, he was at the peak of his popularity. Rajiv considered it essential to revitalize and even reinvent the Congress Party as Mahatma Gandhi had done years ago. The centenary session of the Congress was held in Bombay that year. The Congress is among the world's oldest democratic parties, having been founded on 29th December 1885 by an Englishman, A.O. Hume. Until the arrival of Mahatma Gandhi on the Indian political scene, it was an upper middle class organization. The opening and closing sessions began with prayers for the long life of Queen Victoria, King Edward VII, and King George V. Gandhi took over the Congress in 1920 and within a very short time turned it into a mass movement. He rewrote the party's constitution, established a working committee and the All India Congress Committee. At one time, he mobilized 40 million people to participate in the freedom movement. The security arrangements at Brabourne Stadium, where the centenary session was being held, were very tight. At the entrance, I saw the police pushing away several senior Congress leaders. I managed to squeeze in with the help of Sunil Dutt. I was asked to look after the large number of foreign delegations who had been invited to join the celebrations. The most prominent guest was Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. When Rajiv Gandhi got up to speak, he got a standing ovation. It was a very emotional moment. Rajiv spoke like a visionary. He was dismissive of some of the policies the Congress had been following. He particularly targeted the power brokers whose thinking was behind the times, whose dedication was questionable, and worst of all, who had no vision. For them, money took precedence over morality. Rajiv's speech made a tremendous impact. It was well drafted and he spoke a new language. Tradition was not to be jettisoned, but innovation would be on top of the agenda. We all returned from Bombay surcharged. However, as the weeks went by, I could see that the old guard of the Congress had not taken kindly to the speech. These were the real power brokers of the party, and in the long run, it was they who succeeded in skillfully outmaneuvering Rajiv. In front of him, they praised him for the great speech, but behind his back, they sabotaged him and his program. At this time, Rajiv was guided chiefly by his close friends who were very bright, full of vigor, and genuinely wanted to see him succeed. But their inexperience was all too visible, and their grasp of the complexities he faced was limited. They were not familiar with the history of the Congress or with the freedom movement. They suggested change without realizing that change had to be managed, guided, monitored, and eventually change had to change. The memory of Rajiv's speech and the Congress centenary faded away all too soon. In October 1986, the Prime Minister shifted me to the Ministry of External Affairs. A month earlier, on 1st September 1986, Rajiv participated in the 8th Non-Aligned Summit in Harare, Zimbabwe, to which I accompanied him. At the time, he was still the chairman of the summit and was to hand over the responsibility to Zimbabwe Prime Minister Robert Mugabe that afternoon. At the morning session, Yasser Arafat, chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, launched a blistering attack on Iran. During the lunch break, we heard that the leader of the Iranian delegation, Ayatollah Khomeini, would exercise his right of reply. I told Rajiv that in that case, the summit would begin on a confrontational note. I suggested that he ask to see Ayatollah Khomeini. Rajiv asked me to arrange a meeting with him. I told Ayatollah Khomeini that The Indian Prime Minister wished to see him at his convenience. He readily agreed. Rajiv and I went to see the great man. Rajiv said that he had come to the Ayatollah not as a prime minister but as a friend and well wisher of Iran and its people. There was a centuries old relationship between the two countries. Rajiv then said, I have come to ask you for a favor. Please let us know what you want us to do. The Ayatollah replied. Rajiv said, we have heard of your intention to exercise your right of reply to Arafat. Ayatollah again inquired what the Indian Prime Minister wished him to do. Rajiv requested him to not exercise the right of reply. After 15 seconds, the Ayatollah said, if the Prime Minister of India, as a friend, asks me to do so, I will oblige him. It was a triumph of Rajiv Gandhi's diplomacy. Rajiv Gandhi took Indo-Soviet relations to new heights. Rajiv and Sonia paid a week-long official visit to the USSR in May 1985. Apart from visiting several parts of the Soviet Union, Rajiv Gandhi and Gorbachev had prolonged discussions about Indo-Soviet relations. Several agreements were signed on the development of trade as well as economic, scientific, and technological cooperation. They also discussed the possibility of joint ventures for building various industrial lands in India. Gorbachev supported the initiative launched by Argentina, India, Greece, Mexico, Tanzania, and Sweden, calling for a worldwide moratorium on nuclear testing and the production and development of nuclear weapons delivery systems. Within a short period after becoming General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Gorbachev had abandoned the fundamentals of the Soviet Union's relations with the rest of the world. Internally, his aim was to overhaul the entire Soviet system, which for the past several decades had stagnated. Gorbachev was dedicated to the transformation of Russian society through accelerated social and economic reforms. In other words, he wanted his country to embark on the democratization of society. This reform was called Perestroika. At the same time, he launched a program for drastic economic development termed Glasnost. The whole world watched the revolutionary changes that Gorbachev had initiated with eager interest. But he got his priorities wrong. He put Perestroika before Glasnost. The Chinese were more realistic. Glasnost, that is, economic development, took precedence over Perestroika, that is, democratization of society. Gorbachev was scheduled to visit India in 1986. After the SAARC summit in Bangalore ended, preparations for the all important visit started in earnest. He and his wife got a tremendous welcome on their arrival in New Delhi on 25th November 1986. It reminded me of the popular welcome Khrushchev and Bulganin had received in 1955. Rajiv had a one-on-one meeting with Gorbachev at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. No one else from the Indian side was present, although a Soviet interpreter was allowed to take notes. This was unfortunate as we had nobody to do so. While we were preparing for Gorbachev's visit, P.N. Haskar had repeatedly told me to take down everything that transpired during the meetings of the two leaders as the Soviets would record every word. In the plenary on the afternoon of 27 November, I saw Gorbachev dominate the meeting. The achievement of Gorbachev's visit was the signing of the Delhi Declaration by the two leaders on 27 November 1986. The Delhi Declaration was a product of the new thinking of both leaders. That a Soviet leader had agreed to sign an agreement that made a reference to non-violence showed that the Soviet Union had come a long way from the Stalin era. The two countries also proposed an international convention that would ban the use or the threat of the use of nuclear weapons. This was remarkable and unprecedented. The officials of two countries had spent many hours in preparing the declaration. I too participated in the discussions and witnessed the change in the working style of the Soviet officials team. They were no longer parroting standard cliches. It was quite obvious that perestroika was working. Gorbachev's wife, Raisa Maximovna, and Sonia Gandhi spent many hours together. Rajiv and Sonia, however, did not warm up to Mrs. Gorbachev, who was fastidious and somewhat demanding and excessively preoccupied with her clothes. Rajiv and Sonia Gandhi visited the Soviet Union in February 1991 after Rajiv had resigned and Chandrasekhar had taken over as Prime Minister. Not only was the visit not properly organized, we did not have any set agenda. Rajiv Gandhi decided not to inform Prime Minister Chandrasekhar about the visit. When we arrived in Moscow, there was no senior Soviet officials to receive Rajiv Gandhi, Sonia, and the other members of delegation, which included Ramesh Bhandari, Manishankar Iyer, and Rajiv Shukla, at the time a journalist on the rise. We were put up in two guest houses not too far from the Kremlin. Rajiv asked to meet Gorbachev, and Gorbachev changed the timing of his meeting 3 times, and when it happened, nothing substantial was discussed. In the evening, he invited Rajiv and Sonia, other members of the delegation, and me to see a performance at the Bolshoi Theatre. We were a bit surprised that the Soviet leader, who had publicly recognized the role of Rajiv Gandhi, was playing to strengthen Indo Soviet relations and had been full of praise for the former Prime Minister, did not attach much importance to Rajiv's February visit. The next morning, we left for Tehran and Rajiv was received by the President Rafsanjani. He surprised Rajiv by telling him that Gorbachev had told him that he would be coming to Tehran. However, in his memoirs, Mikhail Gorbachev wrote with great emotion. When last time we met, Rajiv Gandhi had already resigned as Prime Minister to become leader of the opposition. I could understand the way he must have felt, and Raisa Maximovna and I did everything we could do to show our sympathy and support. However, the moment we met our Indian friends, we realized that they had already swallowed the bitter pill. Rajiv made a sound analysis of the reasons for his party's defeat and criticized both the policy of the Congress party and his own political errors, particularly concerning the pace of reforms. Like a mature statesman, he weighed up the pros and cons of his new situation. He had become an experienced, tough politician. Then I later learned about his successful election campaign. I felt sincerely glad for my Indian friend, and I was deeply shocked on hearing the untimely tragic death of this outstanding statesman, Mikhail Gorbachev. Thanks for listening. The British Prime Minister was rigid and self righteous on the matter of the apartheid. Self righteous means believing that one's ideas and behavior better than others. British policy was to have the cake and eat it too. This means to get two good things at the same time. Apartheid was an abomination, and we had severed all contacts with Cape Town in 1954. Abomination. Abomination means a thing that causes disgust. Tradition was not to be jettisoned, but innovation would be on top of the agenda. Jettison. Jettison means to get rid of something that is not wanted. We returned from Bombay surcharged. Surcharged. Surcharged means renewed. Gorbachev supported the initiative launched by Argentina, India, Greece, Mexico, Tanzania, and Sweden, calling for a worldwide moratorium on nuclear testing. Moratorium. Moratorium means to stop an activity for a fixed period of time. Thank you very much.